that's her habit to give quotations. She says, a testimony is sufficient when it rests on certain postulates she's giving. A testimony is sufficient when it rests on, first, a great number of very sensible who agree in having seen well. A great number of very sensible witnesses who agree in having seen well. So this is one of the qualifications for a person who can give a testimony. He should have seen it well. He should have been a very sensible witness. So that is one. Number two, who are sane bodily and mentally. So they should be someone who are absolutely sane, means people who can think cogently, bodily and mentally. That's what the second postulate or second condition she is giving for getting a testimony from them. Third, who are impartial and disinterested. Impartial means they're not taking sides, and disinterested means not interested in any other thing, and who unanimously agree. The next condition, fourth condition, is these people who would like to offer, they unanimously agree because they come together and they agree on a particular point in the same way. All of them agree in the same way. The fifth, who solemnly certify to the fact, who solemnly certify to the fact, who very seriously, very studiously certify the fact. Whatever the fact they find, they also say, yes, this seems to be correct. This is how she has wanted to explain what testimony is like by quoting from Voltaire, a philosopher. Okay. Then she starts off saying, there is one Count Agenor de Gasperin. Count Agenor de Gasperin is a French name, a psychical researcher who investigated into many things. And one of the things which he researched into is table tipping, the table which we use to write or keep the books and things like that. That tips means that turns, and that is the thing on which he investigated, I believe. De Gasperin is a French psychical researcher who investigated also into table tipping as to why it's happening, who is doing, and all that. That was something which he investigated into. He was a Protestant. Protestants, are the people who branched away from the original church, Roman Catholic Church, and this separation happened somewhere in 16th century, we're told. It took place first in Germany. And Protestants believe Pope is the representative of Christ. Pope is the representative of Christ. So they have that sort of belief. And as against them, there are people who are called Catholics. So Catholics will find about if they're coming when they are coming. So Catholics, if you want to know in the beginning itself, they are people who are interested in God, and they also believe God is interested in the individual human beings. God is interested in the individual human beings is what they believe. And they feel God is objective. We can see him, we can feel him, that sort of a thing. That's what they call God. And they also believe, Catholics believe, they can have a relationship with Christ or God by having or resorting to prayer. And they believe in the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And they believe each individual is accountable for the way he lived his life, the deeds he has done, etc. If he has done good deeds, he is good. If he has done something bad, he is doomed. That's the philosophy they subscribe to. Right. So, de Gasperin, a French psychical researcher, he started investigating into table tipping. See, this is something which has taken place abroad. They used to see the furniture moving on its own, or the table which is being used, suddenly it turns upside down. The legs come to the top and the base goes to the place where we keep normally the books or the records. That goes down. This is how it used to happen, table tipping. he was a Protestant. That is the description they have given. He had entered into a lot of conversations, a very lengthy conversation with Des Mosaics. That's another name, a lady journalist, DESMOUSSEAUX. These are all French names, so I may be making mistakes while pronouncing them. Des Mosaics is the lady journalist. He entered into this De Gasperin, entered into a lot of conversations with this lady, and also de Merville, MIRVILLE, LLE, de Merville, another man from France who was also a writer and someone who was also interested in this subject of table tipping and all the rest of it. He was also interested in spiritual subjects. With these two people, this gentleman Gasperin has entered into a lot of conversations. They exchanged a lot of conversations. They put all that conversation into a book form also. D. Gasperin, along with Professor Thury, THURY, witnessed, they saw a lot of incidents connected with table tipping. HPB now is quoting from his book. The experiments were related to the tables moving. The tables were moving on their own. That is something which they saw. And the tables levitating means rising from the ground and floating in the air. That is levitation. The tables were levitating in the air as if they are flying. Sometimes the people sitting in the room were all excited to see all this happening, because a lot of people used to wait for the spirits to come and occupy the medium. They also used to come and participate in these sort of experiments, which used to take place because they were quite interested in finding out who is doing all this. Sometimes the people sitting in the room were so excited, they won't even change the place. They would observe everything without batting an eyelid. Means absolutely carefully they used to observe all the things which are happening. Sometimes the tables moved very vigorously. The tables moved very vigorously as if somebody is pushing them with a lot of force. Sometimes they heard very loud tapping sound on the table. They used to hear tapping of the table. The sound was also very loud. People could hear that. Sometimes it was a gentle rap. Rapping means a small sound, a small knock. So sometimes the sounds were like raps, small. Sometimes it was very vigorous, very, very loud, so that everybody in the room could hear it. The sounds were so loud sometimes that the table would break. And sometimes the sounds were ever so gentle that hardly audible. So both sounds were there. The sounds which were very loud, almost making the table break into two pieces. Sometimes the sound is so gentle that not able to listen is something which people have talked about. So this is a phenomena which they are examining, which they were experimenting about tables moving, furniture moving in a room. This is what she has talked about in this chapter 4, which she goes on talking and discussing various things connected with this. It was observed that the tables moved without contact. The tables moved without contact, means no human was visible as if he is pushing or doing anything. Without anybody's physical contact, the tables moved. People who have seen these experiments did not naturally agree with British physicist Faraday, British physicist by name Faraday, who wrote an analysis of the spiritual hallucinations. So Faraday examined such things, including the table movements and table sounds and so many other things. And he wrote a book, the British scientist, a physics scientist, who wrote an analysis of the spiritual hallucinations. So people who have seen the experiments, they were actually seeing tables moving, the sounds being audible and all that. So they didn't agree with what he wrote in the book, The Spiritual Hallucinations. So that lady, Des Moussacs and de Merville, wrote a lot of these details running to several pages. So they both also have done a lot of experiments together along with the Gasparin. And so they had a lot of details, working details, which they put it into a form of a book-like thing. They were dealing with devilish forces and not divine forces, is what it is commented upon. They were dealing with devilish forces and not divine forces. Devil also has got energy, divine energy also is there. But these people who are experimenting with the table moving, tables upside down, becoming upside down and all that, were actually dealing with devilish forces and not divine forces, is the comment given by the author. Catholics believe in Christ and the Bible. Catholics believe in Christ and the Bible. Here they were talking about the force of Satan as against the power of Christ. They also recognize, Catholics recognize, that there's an evil force called Satan who does a lot of mischief, and he does a lot of things which are not all that easily digestible by Christians. So he is Satan. So Catholics believed all these movements of the furniture, etc., are all because of the satanic forces. That's an evil force. Church also did not stop them from publishing such writings. Normally, churches, they come in the way and they will say, you're a Protestant, you're supposed to believe in Christ, and you're not supposed to write about all this, which is trying to show all that power a devil has. So you should not write, is normally what a church would do. But then they were writing these books or writing these articles, and the church did not stop them from publishing such writings, is what HBB is saying. There were two parties. One party used to believe a devilish force is acting. Another party was saying the person who is dead is returning to do all these mischievous deeds. So there are two ways of looking at it, how this furniture is moving, how the furniture is producing sound. Some people said it is a devilish force in action. A devilish force in action. Some other people who formed another party, they were saying a person who is dead is returning to the surface in the form of a spirit, and then he's doing all these mischievous deeds. So it was a talking point for everyone, how this is happening. Who is exactly the person responsible or the force responsible for these table movements or furniture movements, etc. So it was talking about devil, who is represented by Satan, satanic forces as we talked about. So if it was devil who is represented by Satan, and a couple of Roman Catholics wrote profusely about the devil rather than about divine or Christ. Roman Catholics, they are the earlier segment of Christians. They believe in Christ. They believe that they can pray to him and get nearer to him and all that. But still, a lot of Roman Catholics wrote about this profusely and described the devilish forces rather than the divine Christ's power. This is the unfortunate part of it, because they were interested in this movement, which was very, very new for all of them. So they were interested in finding out. So Roman Catholics also joined, and they were talking about the spirit of Satan, which is the devilish force, and they wrote a lot about that devilish force rather than divine or Christ's power. They went to the extent of saying the devil is the chief pillar of faith. Actually, it is Christ. He should be the chief pillar of faith for them. Christ is the chief pillar of faith for them. But then these people who went into this trip with the devils, they said, they went to the extent of saying that the devil is the chief pillar of faith. So they started believing more the work of the devil than the work divine. So this is something which happened at that point of time with lot of grief. A lot of people have observed this. People were not with the divine forces, but they were playing with the devilish forces. They were also saying, this party who are talking about Roman Catholics were also saying that there is a partnership of devil and God. Can that happen anytime? There is no possibility of good and bad staying together. But they believed, these people who are experimenting with these tables and movements and sounds, they believed that there is a partnership which is happening between devil and God. So this is a strange belief which people could not understand. But a lot of people who were busy with this experimentation, they said that there is a partnership of devil and God, because devil is the person in charge, or devil is the force in charge of all these phenomena. God is the silent partner. They also said in the partnership, like it happens in a firm doing business, there is someone who is an active partner, somebody who is a sleeping partner. Here they say God is the silent partner of the firm. Devil is the active partner. So this is how they went on describing. God is the silent partner, devil is the active partner. The devil is working and God is earning profits. This is also something which they have said, which was blasphemous. Means it's a big mistake to say from the working of the devil, the divine is reaping benefits. This is something which they have said, which was not at all accepted by the people who believed in Christ and God. But then these people were saying the devil is working and God is earning profits. So this is how the movement took its shape, and there were Protestants in it. There were also Catholics in it. Both were thinking and saying they were not quite sure as to what's exactly happening. Who is behind this force? Who exactly is doing it? Whether it's the devil or some other force. So they were not quite sure of that. But then they were always thinking, devil is working and God is earning profits. So this is something which they had in mind. This is what it has been quoted in the book, in the 4th chapter of Isis Unveiled. All these go to prove at that time, year 1802 or 1805 or so, all these go to prove at that time, around 1800 years, there were various schools of thought trying to explain the unknown. So people were interested in knowing what is unknown, what is something which is apparently known to everybody. There is something which is happening which is not known to everybody. So this is something which was interesting them, but they didn't know who was doing all this. So all these go to prove that at the time of year 1800 or so, 1805 or 1806 to be very precise, there were various schools of thought trying to explain the unknown. So a lot of people, each one had a different method of explaining how this unknown works or what this unknown is all about. So this is the curtain raiser for the 4th chapter. So the 4th chapter begins with this new concept of the furniture moving, the tables getting upside down, and some sounds being heard, and sometimes a gentle sound, sometimes a very big sound as the table is breaking and all that. So some 3 French people were people who started investigating. They wrote a book also giving all their experiments, of details of experiments. And a lot of people used to gather in the rooms where these experiments used to be conducted. So this is something which she gave as a beginning of the chapter. And Catholics, not only Protestants, even Catholics joined and doing all this. But in the midst of all this, there was a person, a British physics professor by name Faraday, who wrote an analysis of the spiritual hallucinations. Means this is all hallucination created by your own mind. It is nothing real, is what he perhaps started saying. So this is the book, and nobody trusted him. Nobody trusted him because they all were interested in this movement of finding out or entertaining themselves with the movement of furniture and etc. So all this, and we've heard devilish force is in charge of all this, is what one party said. Another party said it is not the devil, but a dead person, like we have seen in spiritualism, how a dead person visits the medium and starts talking through the medium. A dead person actually is coming into that room and using his power to move the furniture. So that is what some people believed. And Roman Catholics also joined the game. So they were also saying, but they had said certain things which are very, very fundamentally, which go against their beliefs. Catholics believe in Christ. Catholics believe in prayer to Christ and all that. But then they were saying, devil is the chief pillar of faith. Actually, they should have reposed faith. They should have kept their faith in Christ. But these people who were experimenting, they said the devil is the chief pillar of faith. And there is a partnership happening between God and devil, which is impossible. Good and bad cannot coexist together. And good always will prevail over bad. But they were believing that devil and God were partners. And they also said God is not an active partner, but devil is an active partner. And because of the work which the devil is doing, the benefits of the work of the devil, God is taking. These are all certain beliefs which those people had. And all these were happening. And various schools of thought, they were trying to explain what this unknown phenomena is all about. So HPB says there was blind fanatism about the religion in those days. HPB says there was blind fanatism. Fanatism is matamaudhyamu, not getting into the various philosophies as such, but then believing it because somebody has said that is the way, they believed it. So HPB says there was blind fanatism about the religion, propagated by the church and the clergy. Who were responsible for this fanatic religion? The fanatic religion to be spread amongst human beings. Who was responsible is the church at that point of time. Church means congregation of people. When people come together, it is called church. So the church and the clergy. Clergy means people who act as priests there, people who preach in the church, people who work as priests in the church. They are responsible. They were the people who are changing all this so-called religious philosophy into a dogmatic philosophy, a philosophy which believes in fanatism. Fanatism is mudhatvam. There is nothing else other than foolishly believing whatever the clergy said is right. So this is what they were saying. The academies of sciences and the clergy fought many a battle. So the people who are from the scientific background, the academies, they were trying to bring people out of this fanatism. So the academies of science and the clergy fought many a battle. Many times they tried talking to the clergies and saying this is not the way, we should misguide people and all that. But then clergy the priests had their own method of working, so they were going on with their dogmatic approach of religion. So the academies of sciences and the clergy fought many a battle, means many battles they have fought. But this religious fanatism was not removed. So it was not possible to remove because people believed it blindly. Blind belief is something which is very difficult for people to change. They are blindly into it. They are not gone in with a sense of proportion. They have just gone in because somebody has said that is the way. So the blind belief, to remove it is very difficult. So in spite of the scientists trying, it was not possible to remove this religious fanatism. It was not possible to remove that. And HPP says even educated persons followed blindly what was given to them as religion. So at least the people who are educated, we expect them to analyze, understand, and is there truth in this, and then accept things which are proposed as religion. But then educated people also were quite scared to analyze, was quite scared to understand in detail. So even educated people followed blindly what was given to them as religion. So HPB says, in spite of efforts, science could not conquer the falsely propagated religion. So HPB says in this chapter that in spite of good efforts by scientific community, it could not conquer the falsely propagated religion. That's the power the church had. That is the power the priests had, more than the scientists, more than people who gather facts and try to investigate the facts and try to place a theory before human beings. Those scientists' observations were not accepted, but blindly somebody is saying this is the way to go about following the religion is something which all of them took to like fish taking to water. So this is how the efforts of the scientists could not conquer the falsely propagated religion, says HPV. Theology means the method of the religious method, theology. The old method of the churches could not be changed or silenced. Theology, the old method of the churches, could not be changed or silenced. So neither they could change nor they could silence it. The way the religion was run was something based on blind belief. So theology, the old method of the churches, could not be changed or silenced. So churches went about doing what they felt was right. HPB says people were not ready. HPB says people were not ready to accept even scientific experiments. People were not ready to accept even scientific experiments because they were told, don't go by what these scientists say. They will doom you. They will simply put you into a difficult situation. So go by what we are saying. So they were more powerful. They were people who were belonging to the church. So the scientists, in spite of showing through experiment, whatever the priest class is saying is not true, they were not able to understand. The people were not following the scientists' method of explanation. And HPB talks about a professor, Oersted. Actually, Oersted is the name. Professor Oersted, who invented the concept of electromagnetism. He found out what is electromagnetism, which is well known even now. The current passed through a wire moved the needle to a perpendicular position. So a current passed through a wire, moved the needle, which was in the lying position, to 90th degree. It used to get perpendicular. So this is something, the experiment which he has done, this professor Oersted, and he invented the concept of electromagnetism. HPB says this as an example. The current passed through a wire, moved the needle to a perpendicular position from the lying position. Means if it is lying parallel to the ground, when the current is passed, it would rise. The needle will rise and go at about 90 degrees. Suppose the professor heard the superstitions, people were conversing with needles. Suppose this same professor who did all these experiments, he was given to understand that superstitions are there, people are talking with needles, people are conversing with needles, and that the needles are controlled by an unknown intelligence. If the professor had that sort of a background or that sort of an education, that there are superstitions and people who are conversing with needles, and that the needles are controlled by unknown intelligences, he would not have taken up the experimentation with needles, because he would have been scared to touch the needle, because needles are being used for a different purpose. That's what HPV intends to convey. He took to experimentation with the needle, or like a clock needle which is there, and that is going up when the current is passed through that. So he wouldn't have perhaps ventured into this if suppose the information was there with him. Maybe some superstition is there with the needle, or some people are conversing with needles, and that some needles are controlled by unknown force. So current, when you passed into it, you have not seen the current actually moving into it. It's something which is going through the water, through the wire and moving the needle. So it's not visible. So like that, if suppose he was told the needles would be controlled by an unknown force or intelligence, perhaps he wouldn't have taken up the experimentation with these needles, and electromagnetism would have been never invented. So this is how HPB says, due to lack of proper education, even when the experiments were done, even when the experiments were shown that this is the real fact of nature, people are not willing to accept it. So she gave an example of this electromagnetism invention to prove how lopsided was the thinking of the people at that point of time. So this is the reason why, this is the reason she has given this experiment. Religion was filled with a lot of superstitions. This is another problem with religion even now. Religion was filled with a lot of superstitions, and there were fanatics who did not understand the essence of the religion. What is the true content of religion? They were not understanding, but they were going around the periphery of religion and trying to introduce a lot of rituals, a lot of practices in the name of religion. So religion was filled with a lot of superstitions, and there were fanatics, meaning people who believed it. They were fanatics, means they were extreme believers of that part of religion, which believed in the superstitions and the practices and the rituals, etc., etc. So religion was filled with a lot of superstitions, and there were fanatics who did not understand the essence of the religion. Essence of the religion is not in rituals. Essence of the religion is not in superstitions. But nobody was able to question them. Whatever these people had prescribed, the priests were prescribing, the fanatics were prescribing, people were lapping it up as religion. This is the problem at that point of time. Like some time back, she said, even educated went by what the church said and followed the practices blindly. Even educated went by what the church said and followed the practices blindly. So whether educated or uneducated doesn't matter. They went by the same practices which are prescribed by the church, the priests, etc. So they were not based on sound reasoning, but the real purpose of religion was not being talked about. Only these so-called practices were being given as part of religion. There were others who were believing in spirits. While some people believed in this sort of a structured religion, which was called religion, which was full of superstitions and practices, there were other people who believed in spirits and the deeds of the devil. They went to the extent of worshipping Satan. Normally, people who worship Christ, they will not care for satanic spirit. But there were others who were believing in spirits and the deeds of the devil. They went to the extent of worshipping Satan, Satan. And they said, devil and God work together. This is the unfortunate part of it. They were firm believers in that theory. And then she's again talking about Professor Thury. Professor Thury, Thury, said the objects and furniture can be moved without touching the furniture by invoking ectenic force, ECTENIC, ectenic force, a force brought out by a person using will. So this is the force. So Professor Thury was saying the objects and furniture can be moved without touching the furniture by invoking the ectenic force. As I told you, the spelling is ECTENIC, ectenic force, a force brought out by a person using will. We have seen some time back in the television shows also that somebody could actually bend any metal just looking at it. And we thought he can do it only when he sees the metal sitting opposite to the person who is holding the metal. But then he was in the somewhere in the studio, and somewhere else this metal was there, he could still bend that metal. So some people were having those sort of powers. So Professor Turi said the object and furniture can be moved without touching the furniture by invoking ectonic force, a force brought out by a person using will. So that person uses the power produced by his will to move the articles without touching them. Mr. Crookes, Crookes, he says it is psychic or mental force which is moving the articles. One says it is the power of the will. Will is part of the power of the mind only. Actually, the higher mind has that will. And this gentleman, Crookes, is talking about psychic or mental force which is moving the articles. So both of them more or less think it is the mental capability of a person concentrating on the table and making the table move. That's how these two people said, Professor Turi and Professor Crookes. Both of them felt it is psychic or mental force which is moving the articles or furniture, and the other person said using the power of the will which he has, a person can move the furniture, is what Turi said. So both of them seem to be together, almost saying that it is the power produced by the mind. Both the forces, HPB says, both the forces are almost identical, and these forces were in the possession of Hindu magicians. Whether the word Hindu was there or the people from Sanatana Dharma, it is used by HPB very profusely. Both the forces are almost identical. Whether you call it a force of the will or the power of the mind or psychic or mental power, both are same, she says. Both the forces are almost identical, and these forces were in the possession of the Hindu magicians, the magicians who believed in doing magic and helping people. And those Hindu magicians and adepts of all countries, adepts not necessarily of the Hindu or Tibet, but everywhere, wherever they are, of all countries, even thousands of years ago, 1,000 years ago, not thousands, 1,000 years ago, they had this power to produce, which they could use to move or do anything. So the Hindu magicians could also do this without touching. They could move the table or move anything they intended to. Similarly, she says even adepts of all countries, even 1,000 years ago, they demonstrated that they could move the things without touching them. I'm just giving, by the way, when an adept gets into the room of a person where someone is sitting, he comes through the wall. Nobody has to open the door and then he will let him in and things like that. He can just crash through the wall and appear and be there. So you can imagine what sort of power they had. The adepts had a lot of power. And Leadbeater talks about somewhere that he saw some adepts floating on the water and coming into the headquarters hall. Our headquarters hall, not this side where we meet and have meetings, but the other side where HPB used to sit and live. So he saw a lot of masters, at least a couple of them, sailing over water, not getting wet, just sailing over water, getting into the headquarters hall portion, which is now called HPB's room, and they have come there. So that's how they have immense powers. Adepts have a lot of powers. So Hindu magicians and adepts of all countries, even 1,000 years ago, demonstrated such powers. Even Tibetan lamas, fakirs, miracle workers, and saints who perform miracles. Thaumaturgist is the name. Thaumaturgists. Thaumaturgists. They are saints who perform miracles. They are called by that name. Saints who perform miracles had this power. So this is very elementary power, I guess. Something which they could move or something they could bring in and things like that. So they had this power, and the other people in the West were trying to find out what exactly is causing the movement. All these sort of powers, HPB says this, all these sort of powers are part of Akasha, Akasha Tattva. That's what she means. All these powers are part of the Akasha Tattva, or they're available in the life principle. They're available in the life principle. So they're all there. If somebody has to get them into his grip, he has to earn the capability of getting those powers. So he has to get the ability to grasp those powers. So this is what she says. All these powers are part of Akasha. They're always there, and they're available also in the life principle. In the case of a trance, we're talking about trance, means someone is controlling someone and that person slips into a trance. In the case of a trance induced by a mesmerizer or a hypnotist, in the case of a trance induced by a mesmerizer, the spirit in the subject, who is subject of trance, acts according to the guidance and direction of the mesmerist. So this is what happens. The mesmerist is pushing the person, the subject before him, into a trance, and the subject, the person who has been pushed into trance, he does exactly whatever the mesmerist is asking him to do. So this is what happens in a trance. This is what she is saying. In the case of a trance induced by a mesmerist, the spirit which is in the subject means the person who has been pushed into trance or induced into trance, acts according to the guidance and directions of the mesmerist. So mesmerist controls the spirit in him and moves him and makes him do what all he wants to do. It is the operator's will which is working on the subject. It is the operator's will which is working on the subject. Who is the operator? The person who has induced the trance is the operator. So he is able to operate the other person, and the other person is doing exactly what the mesmerist is asking him to do. The person in trance does exactly what the mesmerist is asking him to do. This is what happens in a trance, she says. Being a passive subject, passive means he is just someone who is not resisting. Being a passive subject in a trance, he is controlled by unseen occult powers. Being a passive subject in a trance, he is controlled by unseen occult powers. So this is what happens. She says, being a passive subject in a trance, he is controlled by unseen occult powers. These powers are with this mesmerist also. So the occult powers are working through the mesmerist, and they are all working in the subject who is in trance. When the subject is conscious during the trance, when the subject is conscious during the trance, he is not passive, but he is very conscious of what is happening. When the subject is conscious during the trance, only psychic, that is internal and mental. This is what is said here. When the subject is conscious during the trance, only psychic and physical, external. Psychic is internal and mental capabilities, and physical is external capabilities, may relate to each other. When subject is conscious during the trance, only psychic and physical powers may relate to each other. Nothing perceivable will happen. So if somebody doesn't want to get himself hypnotized, it's possible he will not get hypnotized. But somebody wants to subject himself to that particular experience, he can get hypnotized. So the person is conscious, he says, no, I will not get hypnotized, come what may, nothing can happen. So this is what she is saying. During the trance, where the subject is conscious, means the person is conscious, the psychic, that is internal and mental powers, and physical, that is external powers, may relate to each other. Only when there is a division, the physical has become passive, physical is become passive, the power has been withdrawn from it, and his power has been taken over by the mesmerist, the trance is happening. But here, the second chap, he is a conscious fellow, he's not allowing that to happen. So the psychic and the physical powers, they relate to each other, and nothing perceivable happens. So we can't see anything happening. Mesmerist will not have an ability to move this person wherever he wants to. The subject in either case becomes physically weak and tired. So she says, in both the cases, because he is exhausting his powers, both in the case of a passive subject going through the experience of trance and a person who is resisting all that and still trying to make his physical and mental powers together to counter the power of the mesmerist, both become physically weak and tired. This is what it is given as an observation. So she has moved from the furniture to now she has moved to a person inducing a trance. And she also says these forces which were used to move articles and furniture and things like that, these things were always available even 1,000 years ago with Hindu magicians and also adepts of all countries. So this is something which we keep remembering. And these principles, these powers are always there. They are in the Akasha. They are in the life principle, means Jivana Tattva has all that. Not the Jiva which is running or which is part of me, but the life force which is outside, the force which is making everything kicking, that life force, that is part of Akasha, that has all these powers. But whoever has the ability to tap them by adopting the proper method, and perhaps you should become eligible to tap. You should have eligibility to tap. If he has no arhata, no eligibility, maybe those powers will not come to him. So she also talked about the hypnotist or a mesmerist giving a experience of a subject for making him work the way he wants, and also the person who is conscious who will not do what the mesmerist wants him. Then HPB says Professor Thury, Thury, who was mentioned earlier also, investigated these manifestations of the movement of furniture. In 1854, Mr. Crookes also agreed and came to the same conclusions that these manifestations are happening through some force in the year 1874. 1854, Thury had investigated about these manifestations and found out certain facts. Similar was what was done by Professor Crookes, who did this in 1874. What HPB has to say, but they were not very precise and definite. They could do something, they could say something, but they were not very precise and definite as to what caused these manifestations. What was the real reason behind why such a thing happened? So that was not very clear. But both of them said, yes, these are happening. One did it in 1854, another has said the same thing, almost same thing in 1874. But they were not very precise and definite as to what caused these manifestations. Both were scientists, very learned men. Both gave their time and undivided attention to these incidents and happenings. Besides, these scientists were so many who strived to unravel the mystery, but never found a final solution. And she also made another observation. Though there were 20 years which passed between 1854 and 1874, the findings of both Mr. Crookes in 1874 and Thury in 1854 were very similar. That means science really has not progressed in between, even for 20 years of period. This is what she talks about the modern science. Whereas the ancient science perhaps would have done something very solid in that particular period of time. Thury did his experiments in 1854, and Crookes did his experiments in 1874. But in between those 20 years, what he found in 1854, Thury, is the same findings of Mr. Crookes in 1874. They're nothing much. And finally, what she said was, they were not very precise and definite. They really didn't pinpoint what exactly is causing the changes or manifestations. Both were scientists, very learned men. Both gave their time and undivided attention to these incidents. They spent a lot of time because that was something which was happening in those days. and happenings. Besides these scientists, there were so many who strived to unravel the mystery. Besides these two, there are a lot of other scientists also who are trying to find out what exactly is the reason behind this mystery, but never found a final solution. Nobody found a real solution, final solution, which will hit the nail hard. Nobody had. So no breakthrough was there, is what she has to say. No breakthrough was there. Nobody found the real reason. HPB says, the truth is lying in immovable and impregnable walls of enchanted castle we hear about in a fairy tale. HPB is saying, the truth is lying elsewhere. The truth is lying in immovable and impregnable walls. Means it is not something which people can easily approach. The truth is lying in immovable and impregnable walls. Nobody can break those walls. Nobody can move those walls. Somewhere behind all those structure of walls, enchanted castle we hear about in a fairy tale. Like in a fairy tale, we talk about a castle which had very strong walls, very tall walls. So like that we hear about a fairy tale of a castle. Behind those walls, impregnable walls, immovable walls, the truth was lying. That's what HPB says. HPB says the truth is lying in immovable and impregnable walls of enchanted castle. So this is what she has to say. HPB further says, secrets of nature are not that easily revealed. Secrets of nature are not that easily revealed. Modern science is caught in materialism, and what is called exact science is not complete in all respects. These are all the comments of Blavatsky. Modern science is caught in materialism, and what is called exact science is not complete in all respects. So this is the reason why the modern science could not break through, could not effect a breakthrough to find out what is happening. The truth is there definitely, but it is lying beyond all these people who are experimenting. So where is it? It is in nature. It's somewhere in the nature. So it's not easy to break into or find out what the nature has to convey to us. Modern science is caught in materialism, and what is called the exact science, what is called exact science, is not complete in all respects. So it's not able to exercise, though it's called exact science, we are not able to use that instrument or tool to find out what is unknown. And the statement saying the secrets of nature are not that easily revealed is something which is it cares for attention. She says the secrets of nature are not that easily revealed. So any person, every person, whoever wants to find out about what is happening in nature, they can't obviously get there. There should be a lot of preparation, inner preparation, which is required to understand the nature of what exactly is the contents of nature and what are the laws under which the nature operates and what are their secrets. So it's not easy. It's not an open book. That's what she says. She says now, after all this talk about science being materialistic and all that, now she says, one has to realize that there is spiritual universe. We are talking about material universe all the time. Whatever is happening in the material universe is what we are trying to find out. HPB is saying one has to realize that there is spiritual universe, which is peopled and inhabited by those who cannot see. There is a spiritual universe which is peopled, means people are staying there, the population there, and inhabited by those whom we cannot see. We cannot see them, but they are living there. That's a spiritual universe. ఆధ్యాత్మిక ప్రపంచం ఏదో ఇంకోటి ఉంది, భౌతిక ప్రపంచం మనకందరికీ తెలిసింది ఉంది. ఈ ఆధ్యాత్మిక ప్రపంచంలో ఉండేవాళ్ళు, నివసించేవాళ్ళు, వాళ్ళని మనం ఈ కళతో చూడలేము. So that's what she is suggesting. One has to realize that there is spiritual universe which is peopled, means populated by and inhabited by, people are living there by those whom we cannot see. So we are not able to see them. So they know the secrets of nature. people whom we are not able to see. Perhaps they know the secrets of nature. And without their help and guidance, without these people who are living in the spiritual universe, without their help and guidance, one is doomed to move in that circle inside and unable to find an exit. So while it is very important to get their help, seek their cooperation. So without their help, without those people who are actually living the spiritual universe, without their help and guidance, one is doomed to move in that circle inside and unable to find an exit. Suppose you are caught in a big circle. You are only going round and round and round the circle. You don't know where to make an exit. That is exactly the position of a person who is living in the material world. So she says, without the help of those people who are living in the spiritual universe, we are not able to move out of the circle of materialism. We have to find out a way of moving away from the materialistic circle. And she says, without their help and guidance, one is doomed to move in that circle inside and unable to find an exit, to have an idea of the circumference of that expansive circle. In what a big abyss we have fallen, we do not know. Abyss means bottomless abyss. There's nothing. It's going on. We're going down and down and down. We really don't know how far we have gone down. This materialism has taken us to such a low height, such depth, not height, depth. So she says, we have no idea of what exactly is happening. So we are caught in that. We are unable to understand the measurements of that circle. As against this, there is the spiritual universe and spiritual circumference, which we are not able to touch. As against the material where we have gone into the depths, there is the other spiritual circle we are not able to touch. We are not able to know that it is there for a long time, because as long as we are in material world, we do not even realize that there is another spiritual circle available. So we are only managing to live happily in this materialistic world or materialistic abyss. So only when we get rid of this materialistic abyss, we come out of that surface, find out some method of breaking that and come out, then perhaps we can see the fringes of the spiritual universe or the spiritual circle. So that is how it has to be done. There should be a lot of effort. Maybe that is what is sadhana, which we have to break, which we have to realize the emptiness of this materialism and move towards spiritual living. We need to approach the nature with a lot of reverence. HPB says, we need to approach the nature with a lot of reverence and work unselfishly to know at least a portion of that all-encompassing nature. We need to approach the nature with a lot of reverence. What many people do, whatever is there available to me in nature is for my enjoyment, is what people think. People who are living in materialistic pursuits we are having. So we feel all that nature has to provide is for our benefit. It is there. So I break the tree, or I bring down a tree, or I see that the mountains are not there. I make them flat so that I can put roads there and things like that. So I'm disturbing the entire nature. So when we are driving from, say, Visakhapatnam to Vijayanagaram, there are two huge mountains. They have made way for the road to be laid, some four-lane road which is laid to go towards Vijayanagaram or further up towards Calcutta. They're too huge, and the name of that particular place is Mahagambhiram. Gambhiram is such a big word. The mountain was called like that. But that was broken. That was separated. And through that, they put see, this is how we have played with nature. So this is what she is saying. We need to approach the nature with a lot of reverence. Even when we are bringing down a tree, we are supposed to take the permission of the tree. Even if it's a tree, somebody was talking in the morning of bringing down the tree. People do take permission. People do offer obeisance. And then because of this reason, we're trying to remove you. Please permit us. So that's how the removal of a tree is done. But we casually behave with trees, casually behave with plants. So this is what is perhaps not taking good care of nature. And if you remember some time back, Uttarakhand experienced huge, it became water belt. The entire Ganges was flowing in Uttarakhand. How it happened? All the hills were broken down for the sake of gravel. All the hills which were there were broken down, especially somewhere above the Gangotri and Dharmshala and such places. The mountains were all destroyed, and the gravel which was there was transported to the city so that they could use it in construction. And all those mountains which used to stop the water flowing, the speed of water, the Ganges, was cut by all those mountains. All those mountains became flat, so the water came down heavily with gusto and submerged major portion of Uttarakhand. So this is what is the result of what we have done. So she says, HPB says, we need to approach the nature with a lot of reverence and work unselfishly to know at least a portion of that encompassing nature. The nature is encompassing everything. It is all encompassing. But even to know a bit of that deeply, understand that nature deeply, we have to work unselfishly to know that part of nature. But we are selfish most of the time when we are dealing with nature. If we are unselfish, it is revealing itself. When we are selfish, we are only removing it, but it's not revealing the secrets. So this is what she's conveying. We need to approach the nature with a lot of reverence and work unselfishly to know at least a portion of that all-encompassing nature. So this perhaps we should try. Then H.P. Blavatsky moves to talk about Socrates. We know this person who was very famous in the Greek mythology, there are a lot of stories about him. Then HPB moves to talk about Socrates, the wise. He's called Socrates the wise. Socrates asks his disciples, he's posing a question to his disciples, what then is produced from death? This is moving away from the other subject. She has moved to Socrates, and Socrates is asking his disciples, what then is produced from death? What is coming out of death is perhaps what Socrates has asked. And the reply was life. What then is produced from death? The reply is life. See, the beginning of life coming to an end is death. Death means a new beginning. That means life again. So that perhaps is the reason why the disciples who were taught by Socrates replied like that. What then is produced from death is the question of Socrates, and the people, disciples, they said it is life. The second question, can the soul, since it is immortal, be anything else than imperishable? This is the second question given by Socrates. Can the soul, since it is immortal, be anything else than imperishable? Is there anything, any other form it can become because it is immortal? Can the soul, since it is immortal, be anything else than imperishable? It means it remains ever. The reply, the seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. The seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. Seed eternal is soul. Seed cannot develop unless it is part consumed. Seed eternal is soul. What the seed wears as bodies or vestures die. What the seed wears as bodies or vestures die. Correct? This is exactly what Theosophy also is talking about. The seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. The seed, suppose we imagine that it has 7, like the Theosophical explanation has, we have 7. The 4 die and the 3 remain. The seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. Means the seed becoming more holy, more purposeful, moving towards perfection. It's not possible for the seed unless the part is dying and new beginning is made again. The death means new life, and again new life is beginning, and again the seed is developing. The seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. So this is how we have to understand the particular reply of these disciples. And seed eternal is soul. Seed which is eternal is soul. What the seed wears as bodies or vestures die. In addition to the above reply, it is not quickened unless it dies. In addition to the above reply this is quotation. It is not quickened unless it dies. What doesn't get quickened? The soul, the individual soul becoming perfect. It's not possible. If the body is attached to the soul, if they don't die, there's no scope for perfection. That's what it means. It has taken the first birth, it has moved, say, X distance in becoming perfect. Then it has taken the second birth, again, it has moved to another destination towards perfection. So it says, it is not quickened. The journey is not quickened unless it dies. What is that it? It starts, the sentence, the quotation starts with it, it. It is not quickened unless it dies. What is it that it? How do you explain it? It is said that it is the journey towards perfection. That it is the journey towards perfection. So this is the conversation between Socrates and his disciples. I just read the questions once again for the sake of remembering them. What then is produced from death? Life, was the reply. Can the soul, since it is immortal, be anything else than imperishable? The reply is, the seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. Means unless a part dies. The seed cannot develop unless it is in part consumed. Seed is compared with the soul. Seed eternal is soul. Seed eternal is soul. What soul wears as bodies or vestures die. In addition to the reply, above reply, it is not quickened unless it dies. The first it is, I is capital I. It is not quickened unless it dies. What is that it? It is the journey towards perfection. So this is what the conversation which she picked up from Socrates, which she had appended here. Now, HVB tries to give another example. HVB goes on to describe a flower. HVB goes on to describe a flower. A flower, it's in quotation, a flower blossoms, then withers and dies. A flower blossoms, then withers and dies. It leaves a fragrance behind, which long after its delicate petals have become a little dust. A flower blossoms, then withers and dies. Some people say it only lives for 24 hours, a flower. It leaves a fragrance behind, which long after its delicate petals, the delicate petals, they fall also, they fall onto the ground. So they are but a little dust. So the petals which are soft, they become dust. But still the fragrance lingers in the air. That's what she says. The fragrance is continuing even then. The petals also are not there. The flower has fallen down. The flower is withered and dead. And the petals also have become dust again. But the fragrance continues. HPB says, our material sense may not be cognizant of it, but it nevertheless exists. HPB says, to our material senses means we are not able to see the flower. We are not able to see with our eye the flower. We are not able to feel with our hands the flower because it has become part of dust. HPB says our material senses may not be cognizant of the flower, but it nevertheless exists. In what form it is existing? The fragrance is something which is existing, so the flower exists. That's what she says. So this is an example she gave about a flower. And then she moves towards music. She has talked about the flower and the fragrance. The petals also drop down. the flower dies, the fragrance continues, the petals become part of dust, still the fragrance is there. So we are not able to perceive the fragrance, but the fragrance is there, it exists. That's what she says. And now HPB talks about music. Let a note be struck on an instrument. Let a note be struck on an instrument, and the faintest sound produced an eternal echo. Let a note be struck on an instrument, and the faintest sound produces an eternal echo. An effect is created on the invisible waves. I'll read this again. Let a note be struck on an instrument, and the faintest sound produces an eternal echo. Even the slightest sound, small sound on the instrument, it has an echo. Echo means pratidhvani. Somewhere else it is registered. The echo is there. It produces an echo. Eternal echo. Eternal means the sound once produced is always there. It is not removed. We may not be able to hear, like we are not able to see the fragrance or feel the fragrance of the flower. But the sound produced, the echo, is always there. An effect is created on the invisible waves. An effect is created on the invisible waves of the shoreless ocean of space. An effect is created on the invisible waves of the shoreless ocean of space. So our oceans have a place which we call as beach. There is sand is there. We can see some place where land is there in the ocean. But then she's talking about an effect is created on the invisible waves. Waves also are not visible, of the shoreless ocean of space. It is regarding the space, the akasha. It is like something like a shoreless ocean. It has no land portion at any point of time. After any distance, we only see no shore. So shoreless ocean means completely it's ocean, only a big ocean. So she's talking about an effect of the eternal echo is created on the invisible waves of the shoreless ocean of space. And the vibration is never wholly lost. That vibration which is created by producing that small sound is never wholly lost. We have not heard it because our capability to hear is very limited. But then it has produced an effect on this shoreless ocean, and the waves are also invisible, but the sound is almost there eternally. Its energy being once carried from the world of matter into the immaterial world. Its energy being carried from the world of matter into the immaterial world will live forever. So if anything is moved from material to immaterial world, it will live forever. That is the sign of eternity. The energy being once carried from the world of matter into immaterial world, it will live forever. This is what HPB is saying about music. And man, we are asked to believe, say HPB, and man, we are asked to believe, says HPB. Man, the living, thinking, reasoning entity. Man who is a living being and a thinking and reasoning entity. He's able to reason out everything, he's able to think about everything. That person is called man. But the dwelling deity evacuates his casket and be no more. Man is a living entity. That living entity is always living. That living entity of man is always living. But the indwelling deity evacuates. So in this man, there is an indwelling deity, means there is a amsha of Bhagavan living within us, which is escaping this casket. Casket means a box. Casket means a box. This box has got the component of godliness or divinity, and that is escaping. When that is there in man, man is moving around. He is conscious of it, not conscious of it is a different question. But there is divinity in him. That divinity is also in that casket. Casket means the body and the soul. But the indwelling deity evacuates his casket and be no more. So when that person is no more, we say he is no more, the indwelling deity has gone out. It is escaped from the man who is thinking man, who is reasoning man, and all that. All that comes to naught. All that reasoning, thinking, physically comes to naught. But then in other fields and other realms, he is alive. This is something which HPB has put in this book. She says, would the principle of continuity, which exists even for the so-called inorganic matter, inorganic means not living. She says, would the principle of continuity, which exists even for the so-called inorganic matter, for a floating atom be denied to the spirit, whose attributes are consciousness, memory, mind, and love? She has this to say. She says the principle of continuity means existence and eternity and all that, which exists even for the so-called inorganic matter. Even the what we call not living matter also continues to live. For a floating atom which is floating within it, can it be denied to the spirit whose attributes are, what are the attributes of spirit? Attributes of spirits are the consciousness, the memory, the mind, and love. Even a floating atom also has all this, she says. It has consciousness, it has memory, it has mind, and it has love. It is difficult to believe that spirit doesn't continue to live. It is difficult to believe that spirit doesn't continue to believe. Only people who are not well informed will say spirit doesn't exist. But spirit is always there. It is difficult to believe that spirit doesn't continue. But life continues as long as spirit continues in a different form, in a different world, in a different texture. The life is continuing. So this is what she is trying to communicate. She says the principle of continuity which exists even for the so-called inorganic matter, for a floating atom, can it be denied the spirit of attributes which are consciousness, memory, mind, and love? Meaning all these living beings, because she says in Sacred Doctrine, there is no dead matter. Nothing is dead. Everything is alive. Everything is alive. There is nothing called dead matter. So she's trying to say all these things which are alive have got these common attributes of consciousness, memory, mind, and love. A scientist who believes in matter is not able to comprehend this. A scientist who believes in matter is not able to comprehend in this. Scientist is not experimenting into things which he cannot see. He experiments with things which he can see. So he is a material scientist. So he is called a material scientist. So she says a scientist who believes in matter is not able to comprehend the spirit. Why man is so ignorant of the laws of nature? Why is he so ignorant? How does he learn all about the nature? She says he has to unlearn what all he has learned through physical sciences. How can he understand the laws of nature? That is the question. She says he has to unlearn what all he has learned through physical sciences to have a peep into the world and the laws of nature. So if we have to understand just a bit of the laws of nature, we have to forget about all that is material, all the science which talks about material, unlearn what all one has learned through physical sciences to have a peep into the laws of nature. So if we have to understand the laws of nature, we have to move from matter to the spirit. So somebody was asking in the morning, Atman Tushara Navarnodigar, Atman Tesamiko. How can you, living here, how can we talk about it? Even if you see, even if you feel, we'll not be able to talk about it. It's something like somebody asks you, you have eaten a mango. The sweetness you describe, how can you describe sweetness? You know, mango is sweet, but sweetness, can you describe? Something like that is beingness, B-E-N-E-S-S, beingness. You can't describe it. You can't talk about it. So that's why it's very difficult to talk about Atma. So spirit is something like that. So material scientist is not able to understand, comprehend this. And one has to unlearn all that he has learned through physical sciences to have a peep into the laws of nature. Peep is just a look into the laws of nature. We have to understand the visible totally, and then the invisible will come before us. We have to understand the visible totally. Have we understood everything about the visible aspect of the world? Have we understood? Have we perhaps understood and decided this portion of visible world is not useful to me, so I can live without it? Have we made that sort of a distinction? So we have to understand the visible totally and move to invisible. When can I move to invisible? When I know this visible is not of much use to me, then I can move to invisible. I can leave this and move. I can't travel in both. I can't put my foot in two boats, one visible boat, one invisible boat. I can't travel like that. I can only travel in one. So I have to move away from visible to go towards invisible. When a scientist tries to understand the characteristics of universal energy, when a scientist tries to understand the characteristic of universal energy and says life is nothing but matter, he's saying like that because he's dealing with only material sciences. So he says he understands the characteristics of universal energy and says life is nothing but matter, and he is a specie of energy. Specie means that's a representative of energy. Man is representative of energy. It means that he has not understood what are the alphabets of matter. So if he's saying everything about matter is matter, and there is something else which is existing, and he's only talking about matter, he describes man as matter, he describes everything, the energy as matter, everything is matter. She says, it means that he has not understood what are the alpha and beta of matter. Life is universal energy. Life is universal energy. HPB says there is many doubts in the minds of men regarding the immortality of the soul. So she's moving to the subject of soul, which was touched by Socrates. HPB says there's many more doubts in the minds of men regarding the immortality of the soul. She says it is a malady. Malady ante jadyamu. People won't move away from it. They always think about it. Immortality of the soul anedi ledu. They believe it's not possible. HPB says there is many doubts in the minds of men regarding the immortality of the soul. She says it's a malady. It is due to the ill formation of the physical brain. It is due to the ill formation of the physical brain. The brain has not been properly formed. That's why we have this malady. There are infants, she's giving an example. There are infants who are born with an inner membrane of embryos covering the head at birth. At the time of birth, an infant who is born with an inner membrane of embryos covering the head at the time of birth, that is carefully removed. So there's a thin layer of membrane which is covering the fetus, the body which comes, the physical living body which comes out of the mother's womb. At that point of time, there is an inner membrane which is covering. That is carefully removed, she says. She says there are men who are incapable of understanding till the last hour of their life. There are people who are not able to understand about this soul and the immortality of the soul and everything. There are people who are like that because there are men who are incapable of understanding till the last hour because they carry on with that membrane cover throughout. The membrane cover, which is part of the child when he is born, which is removed very carefully, some people carrying on with it. So they're not able to see the truth. They're not able to see the reality of things. So that's how many people are still carrying on. And that's why they have that malady, she says. The membrane cover is still with them. People who don't understand, the membrane cover is already there. I have seen a membrane cover of a buffalo delivering a small buffalo. The small buffalo, which when it came out, it had all the body covered with that sort of a layer, thin layer, plastic-like layer. And that layer was removed. And I don't know why the person who was working with us at that point of time, he gave that as something in a plate and their mother ate it. I really don't know whether it is good to eat or not good to eat. That was called Mavi in Telugu. So this is what it is. So some people carry on with that membrane cover and they're not able to think clearly. So she explains, membrane is a thin layer of sheet of tissue of cells acting as lining. This membrane is a thin layer of sheet of tissue of cells acting as lining. That cover, which they carry till the end of their life, is not allowing them or disabling them to see clearly and understand what is immortality. So that's the reason why they're not able to see and understand what is immortality. She says, it is also due to vanity that scientists don't give in. It is also due to vanity that scientists don't give in. Vanity, a feeling we know. Scientists don't give in because of vanity, a feeling that we know. Garvam anamata. Na daggara undi knowledge, మీ దగ్గర ఎవరి దగ్గర లేదు అన్నట్టు. So vanity, they live with vanity. That's why they're not able to see, because they're blinded by this vanity. HPB mentions about the disciples of Iamblichus, another philosopher. HPB mentions about the disciples of Iamblichus, a philosopher. The disciples observed that their master, this is again coming back to something which we started in the beginning of the chapter. Their disciples observed that their master was raised to the height of 10 cubits from the ground when he prayed. That Iamblichus, when he was praying, his body was going above the ground level to the height of 10 cubits from the ground when he prayed. But Iamblichus himself said, no, such a thing cannot happen. That's what perhaps he has told his disciples. But disciples maintain that we saw you flying, levitating, that is, from the ground. Similar miracles were recorded in the lives of St. Clare and St. Francis of Assisi, that's the place. Similar miracles were recorded in the lives of St. Clare, Claire, and St. Francis of Assisi, Assis. HPB then goes on to give details of Dr. Dozous, Dozous, an eminent resident doctor who, after careful study, he says, the cures effected at the sanctuary of Lourdes, 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 they say. The cures effected at the sanctuary of Lourdes by means of the water of the fountain have established supernatural character in the eyes of man of good faith. So this Dozous is a very eminent resident doctor who is also in charge of treating pandemics like one which is there now, who after careful study, he says, there were cures effected by the sanctuary of Lourdes by means of water of the fountain that was established in the particular place, and the cures were of supernatural character in the eyes of men of good faith. People who believed, people who saw that, they believed that the cure was possible by the water of that fountain. Lourdes is that place. Sanctuary of Lourdes, by means of the water of the fountain, have established supernatural character in the eyes of men of good faith. But to believe, the church depended on human testimony. The church didn't believe it. People of faith, people who saw people were cured, they believed it. But church didn't believe. Church wanted what? The human should testify and say, that's a miracle. That's the unfortunate part of it. The miracle of the Lourdes, which other people have recognized as a miracle, the church, if they had to notify it, they had to depend on human testimony. Human testimony is something which she talked about in the original opening quotation. HPB says, it is not the first time in the history that the invisible world has to contend against materialistic skepticism. It is not the first time in the history that the invisible world has to contend against materialistic skepticism. Materialists always had doubts. Materialistic scientists always had doubting Thomases, she says. So a lot of people were there who were doubting. But it's not the first time in the history the invisible world has to fight with materialistic scientists or materialistic oriented people or doubting people. Every time in the world it was there. So she says, It is not the first time in the history that the invisible world has to contend, means fight, against materialistic skepticism means doubting. Skeptic means doubtful person. Skepticism of soul blind Sadducees. Soul blind Sadducees. This is the name they have given. Who don't believe in resurrection of Christ are called Sadducees. Sadducees. Blind Sadducees. People who don't believe in resurrection of Christ. Entire Christianity believes in resurrection of Christ. And these Sadducees don't believe in it. They doubt it. So it is like that. The materialistic people, scientists, or people not accepting the invisible world and the cures which are there and the reasons which are there for so many phenomena which are happening are all there. But blind Sadducees don't believe in it, in the resurrection of the Christ. And they adopt pernicious, harmful methods to fight it. So not only they don't believe, they have harmful methods in which they use to silence these people who are talking about invisible. So a lot of people have been killed, I believe. People who are talking about invisible truths. They were all silenced. They were all killed. That's what she says. Kapila, she's talking about a Hindu, or Sanatana Dharma talks about Kapila in the Bhagavata also. Kapila lived before Christ many centuries before. Kapila lived before Christ many centuries before. Kapila, the Hindu philosopher, agreed to the claim of yogins. Yogins mean people who are doing tapas. That in ecstasy, that is samadhi, Brahmananda sthiti, a man has the power of seeing the deity. This is what Kapila had to say. Kapila says, the Hindu philosopher, he agreed to the claim of yogins. Yogins said this, and so Kapila also said, yes, it is true what you are saying. That in ecstasy, in samadhi, in Brahmananda sthiti, a man has the power of seeing the deity. He can see face to face. He can be with the Bhagavat Tattva, face to face, and conversing with the highest beings. It's possible that he talks with the deity also. But what language? There's no language there, but this is the words used by Kapila. Kapila is a very old Hindu saint. He agreed with the claims of yogins that in the state of ecstasy, Brahmananda sthiti, and in samadhi, a man has the power of seeing the deity. He can see his Bhagavat Tattva, and come face to face with them and converse with that highest being. Converse with that highest being. This is what she has covered in this 4th chapter. We have come to the end of the 4th chapter.